this series of videos, Skip Morris, the author of 22 fly fishing and fly tying books, will help you put together a small but deadly team of nymph flies for fishing trout streams and explain how, when, and where to fish each one. He'll also explain how each fly is designed and why. This series is based on his little book, whose cover you see here, that also details 6 ways to fish your 12 nymphs.
Hi, I'm Skip Morris, and the only reason that matters is that you probably want to know who's going to be guiding you through this bunch of videos on how to collect up a set of really effective flies, nymph type flies for trout streams. And so I've written a bunch of books, and I've been fly fishing since I was a kid, and I'm 70 years old at this moment. And I've published hundreds of magazine articles on flies, on fly fishing. So the point is, I know my way around this stuff. I've written a lot of books on fly tying too. So I understand flies. So I think I'm the right guy. I hope you feel that way after you've watched all these. I don't know if it's the most important thing, but one very important thing that these videos will do is to save you money. Because when new fly fishers go out, and this video is for everybody really, but it's especially valuable for new fly fishers, they tend to buy a whole lot of flies and end up with a lot of flies that they never use or that they don't really need, or perhaps most important, that don't make a really effective team. When you have a set of flies for a kind of fishing, like in this case, we're talking about nymph fishing trout streams, those flies have to work together. They have to fill out this big area of niches or niches, if you prefer, and so that the flies support one another, so that if this fly isn't right, that one isn't. If they both aren't right, another one is. Instead of having a bunch of flies that all do the same thing. It's so easy to do that when you go out and just buy a bunch of flies. So I'm going to save you a bunch of money, and you're welcome. Pleasure's mine. Let me tell you a little bit about nymphs. What a nymph is, in fact, it imitates something that lives in a trout stream that trout eat. Typically, originally the name meant actual nymphs, a type of insect. But artificial nymphs, nymph flies, imitate a fish egg, an aquatic worm, whatever's down there that isn't a little fish, because then we're talking about streamers. Anything that's not a little fish is usually, that fly is categorized as a nymph. We have 2 kinds of nymphs, in fact, 2 kinds of flies in general. We have imitative flies. Those are the ones that literally do look like and are supposed to look like something specific, a bug or something else. And then we have attractor flies. And these are flies that really, they look sort of like something alive. Some of them not very much, but some of them very little. But the point is, they're supposed to not look like anything living. They're supposed to look a little bizarre. And sometimes that turns the trick. I find 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 times that I'm fishing, I will actually, and this goes for fishing nymphs and trout streams, I will actually catch more fish on bizarre attractor flies than on imitative flies that actually make a lot more sense. And there are theories about this as to why that is. We don't need to go into them. Just trust me, there are some fairly sound theories as to why attractors can work better than imitative flies. But I typically start with imitative flies because usually that's what works best. And so an important concept to remember is this one. Now, I've come up with some sayings in my years of writing all these books and things, and very few of them are worth repeating or remembering, certainly not worth remembering. One that I believe is worth both is this one. How you fish a fly is at least as important as which fly you fish. So to put it another way, if you have the perfect fly for the moment and conditions, and you fish it poorly, you probably catch very little or nothing. If you have a just passable fly, but you fish it well, you probably do really well. So how you fish, how you present, all the things that go into how you fish a fly, where you put it, how deep you put it, how convincingly you fish it, those things are at least as important as which fly you are fishing. in terms of catching fish, which is kind of an important one of the important results of going fishing. There are 12 patterns here. That's all, just 12 flies. Now, some are going to be in more than one size, some are not. I recommend that you get at least 2 of each, because the one that you have only one of is going to be the one that's going to be the killer fly of the day, and it's also going to be the one that you will lose. You'll break it off on a tree. You'll catch it on a tree limb and have to break it off. You'll catch it on the bottom of the stream and break it off. Something will happen. You'll break it off in a fish. And that's very likely to happen if it's your only one. It's just one of those principles of nature. Let's see. And I'm also going to give you these flies. They're all really proven. I should say that they're all really proven effective flies. You can't question that they've caught who knows how many trout in trout streams. But sometimes even popular flies, maybe the fly shop or the place you order your flies online runs out of that fly, or they replace it with some new snazzy model. So I'm going to give you 2 alternative patterns or flies for each primary pattern of the 12. So if you can't get that one of the 12, you can almost certainly get one of those 2 alternative patterns, and they function just fine. They substitute perfectly effectively. And so I guess really the last thing I need to tell you is that the bead flies, and by this I mean flies that have a bead for a head, a metal bead. And the bead serves really one purpose, sometimes 2 purposes. It's usually a bright bead, a shiny bead, and sometimes that attracts fish. But really the primary purpose of a metal bead is just to get the fly down to the fish. Because when you cast upstream in a river and that fly is trying to sink, you've got to get it down there soon, or it's not going to be down among the fish, because they typically hold near the bed of the stream. It's not going to be down there very long before you get to the end of your drift and the fly swings up and it's not fishing anymore. So you want that fly to sink quickly, and a heavy fly really helps. So that's why the main reason we have bead flies. But what I want to tell you is there are 2 kinds of bead. There are the standard beads, which I believe are made out of brass, even though they come in different colors. And then there are tungsten beads, which also come in a lot of colors now. The tungsten beads are much heavier than the brass beads. And usually, especially since I live here in the West where the rivers are just, we have a lot of rivers that really rip, really fast moving, and you have to have a fast sinking fly. So I usually use tungsten beads, but the brass beads have their place. If the stream's not that fast, a brass bead will slow the descent and allow the fly a little more movement, a little more life in the water, simply because it's not so weighted down. And from here on, I'm just going to take those flies one at a time, explain a little bit about maybe even their history, but really this is a very practical series of videos. I will explain to you how and where and when they are fished, and I will tell you about how they're designed and just really make you comfortable with all 12 nymphs so that you understand what they're for and when you should be tying them onto your tippet.